It's my pleasure to introduce to you Cassiel Gaube, who is a choreographer from Belgium, and his piece SOIREÉ d'ETUDES will present at the festival. And my first question is maybe about your background, because I know you graduated from P.A.R.T.S. and your main field of interest now is a house dance. So how this transition, or do you see any link or something in common between contemporary dance and house dance?
Yeah. So I think maybe the best way to present things is to simply present what I've done in my life over the past 10 years, let's say. So basically, I studied contemporary dance before P.A.R.T.S. and then at P.A.R.T.S. At P.A.R.T.S, obviously, I also studied not only dance, but choreography, and composition. And these are really like art studies in the wide sense of the term. And then when I finished my studies, I didn't know, I was not experienced at all in street dance in general, be it in hip hop, or in house, or in break. I didn't have experiences. I was just really fascinated by it. So after 3 years of studies of contemporary dance, I decided to move to Paris because I knew the community there was very large and lively. And I decided to go to study there in a school which is called štúdiu School, which is the school which has been founded by Bruseli. Bruseli is a popper, so like a dancer, like a really good dancer, who founded štúdiu, which is now the biggest competition worldwide of street dance, which is happening every year in March in Paris. I mean, like there was a pause, like a break of 1 year or 2 years, but now they start again. And so I went to study in that school for 1.5 years, in 2016 and 2017. And in that school, basically, I had classes of hip hop, of break, of popping, and of house. And a style that I really loved and enjoyed practicing was house.
And what was the reason? Why was that?
I mean, it's hard to put in words, right? It's there are things I can say, but first I would say it's a gut feeling, it's an amazing dance. I think it's also a dance that speaks to many people today. It's a dance that wasn't so in the different street dances. I think it's one of the youngest. Hip hop is more from the 70s. The funk styles like locking and popping are also more from the 70s, early 70s. In fact, they are to my knowledge, they really come more at the beginning. House is more from the 80s. Then you have Crump, which is from early 2000 in LA, but that's a totally different story. But yeah, so all of this to say, house is a style that got so far less recognition worldwide than, for example, hip hop or break, right? Which is hip hop on the on the floor work.
Yeah.
And why did it speak to me? I really loved doing it. I really loved doing it. And
love
then
is love.
Yeah, you could say that, yeah. But truly, yeah. And then there is something that I can say more at the conceptual level, which is that house is essentially has in its technique a lot of footwork. When you watch dancers, it's obviously not just footwork, but it's a lot of footwork. And what I found amazing for me, so I think there are two things. It spoke to my guts and to my pleasure of dancing as a dancer, and it also spoke to my analytical mind, because I know that I have a very I have affinities for analyzing things. And what I found amazing was that somehow it's as if house had it's as if it was the dance style that I knew of that had pushed further the exploration of all the possible steps that the human body can possibly implement, the human body can possibly execute, produce. And when I say step, what do I mean? Today, I've come to define a step as any move of the human body that allows the body to operate a weight shift from 1 or 2 feet to 1 or 2 feet.
Yeah.
So like there will be like the broad generalized definition of a step that I would give, and I found that house was somehow the dance style that I knew of that was pushing that type of experimentation the furthest, and I found that fascinating at a choreographic level. And therefore, when I decided that like when in 2018 I decided to make a shift from learning and practicing dancing to starting to make choreographic work, house was really on my mind a lot. It's really what I loved doing. And choreographically, this style was for me at the convergence of it was converging with interests that I had prior to studying house and hip hop, which were interest in the work of Steve Paxton, Trisha Brown, Deborah Hay, Yvonne Rainer, and other like postmodern artists from the Justin Church Theatre Collective, and in which, I mean, like there's a lot of interest for the base elementary mechanics of the human body. And in that paradigm, walking is quite important, or there are often experimentations that, you know, revolves around walking. And I was always fascinated by it, both at a kinesthetic level. I love to do kind of mindful, really slow walking, like just like, you know, doing it for hours. And also at a compositional level, I was very intellectually excited and stimulated by the idea of everything that you can compose from a simple walking.
Yeah.
And so like at the time in my teaching practice that I had started to develop, I was also starting to teach like workshops just on walking and just on running.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was starting to merge this with how can more complex stepping patterns emerge from a walking and a running practice. And so like all of this was kind of brewing in my mind at the time, early 2018. Voila, and then I decided to start making work, and I dived in it. I made a solo that was titled Farmer Train Swirl ETUDES, which was kind of a very subjective and very intuitive exploration of my experience of that dance technique. One thing that I think I should say, I think because otherwise there can be misunderstandings, I really don't want to pose as you know, as a final expert of this technique, or as someone who knows it all, as someone who represents the entirety of this technique. What I can say is that it's one of the techniques I've practiced in my life. You know, I've practiced others before. And in fact, before doing contemporary dance, I did 3 years of Tai Chi, and that also matters to me. And it's the technique. And I work at the moment from my experience of the technique. But so just to make that clear.
Yeah, I think what was interesting for me when I saw the piece, because I'm not an expert in house dance and whatever, but I think you can see that it's a choreography, because there are many this hip hop, house dance, and whatever they do, stage work, which is really actually not a stage work, because it doesn't have I mean, it doesn't have a clear idea, which is developed through the dance, which is developed through the movement. And in your piece, the idea of it is very simple, but it's very clever. And what I really also like about the piece is it is in silence, and then this rhythm comes out. You know, you can really, I mean, you can adapt your hearings and you dive more into rhythm. And this is something which talk to us, to our primary physical experience, because the rhythm is a sense of life. So I think it's this idea to work with the rhythm, with the simple steps, and to create the piece. I think it's, yeah, that's what I like about the piece.
And yeah, like what I can do now, I think, is maybe describe a bit more in detail what the process of creation of Soirée d'études has been. Because now I've spoken about my past experience somehow, where my desire to work in conversation with this dance technique has come from. I've evoked my process in making my solo Farmer Train Swirl etude, and I think if I try to speak to the creation of Soirée d'études, which is the second work, the trio that you're going to present, there it's a process in which basically I tried to pursue the exploration that I had started in the solo, but in a much more systematic way. So 2 years passed between the creation of the solo and the trio, and in that time, what I've tried to do is that I've tried to really define in a much more precise way what my choreographic approach was going to be. Because I think also, like, one thing that maybe is important to say, to voice, is that I think my choreographic work, you know, like the work I present on stage, it's not house. It's not just about house, or, you know, it's like house is one of the one of the poles of interest in the field of the things that do interest me, but also, like, an essential dimension of my work is the analytic approach of the movement that I undertake, and is what this process of analysis will then allow me to do compositionally afterwards. And so these are the two poles that compose my work. So it's not just, you know, like putting house on stage or representing house on stage, even though that is also valuable and that has its place as well. But so if I speak more about this other pole, which became much more defined in Soirée d'études, I think it's twofold. As I've mentioned, what I've tried to do is that I've really, I knew that intuitively I was analyzing the technique. You know, I was like looking at the movements that seem to compose the technique, and I was asking myself, what are they made of? How, in scientific terms, you would ask, how can these be modeled? A model in science is a little representation of a phenomena, of a process. And typically it's the thing, I mean, you do it in all sciences, in natural sciences, you know, typically it's, I would say it's the, so you have like models in biology, you have models in chemistry, but probably the models that you have that are, that's, I don't know how to say, but that are the clearest, or like, I think it's in physics that you find the models in their purest expression, because physics would be like, you know, like the branch of natural sciences, which is somehow the closest to the fundamental, to expressing the fundamental laws of the universe. And so basically a model is a little representation. And this representation typically will use a mathematical formalism, will use mathematical, basically conceptual frameworks. So you ask yourself, how can you model, you know, like the movement of a pendulum? And then you ask yourself, okay, like we have a pendulum, it's basically an object which is moving in a 3D space. It's moving according to time, and we can detect a certain relationship between the movement of the pendulum and the laws that seem to govern gravity and acceleration and mass and so on and so forth. And why do I say all of this? Not not to say that
Yes.
the piece is a scientific endeavor or whatever, but just to come back to like what I've tried to do in this 2 years period between the creation of the solo and the creation of SOIREÉ ETUDES is that I've just given myself time to go into analyzing like the base movements that you can find in these techniques, but not only in these techniques, but basically house for me has been a departure point, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, it contains a lot of steps. Another word for steps would be footwork, like, and I've become interested in footwork in general, in steps in general. So my research outside of the creation of the piece per se has really been to try to analyze how the human body implements, executes, produces steps, and then to try to establish kind of a generalized model for any step that the human body is structurally able to implement. And the side project that I have to SOIREÉ ETUDES is in fact like a research project, which is the attempt to formalize a notation system, which only focuses on notating steps defined as movement of the human body, allowing the human body to operate a weight shift from 1 or 2 feet to 1 or 2 feet. And that's of course like we know that we have the Laban notation that's like 1 century old, which is like just a massive work which is a notation movement notation system, which has accomplished to give people the tools to model the movement of the human body,
whole body,
of the whole movement body. And here I'm just focusing on certain kinds of movements, a certain class of movements.
Okay, so
voilà. And so all this work of research is somehow what underpins the writing of SOIREÉ ETUDES, which is much more, if I wrap it up, like a work of exploring all the possibilities of a stepping human body. And there are connections to house, of course, but it's a vaster research.
Yeah. And I just would like to add that even though step is so simple, it's not always like that. You can see that you can make also very deep research about the steps, and the artistic outcome people could see in Bratislava. And I think the simple step can generate a lot of energy and a lot of positive energy. So that I think would be the best to finish this interview, and I'm looking forward to see live all the steps.
Yes.
Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you so much.